All right, so let's begin the show today with NPS. And today in NPS, we are focusing on debt schemes that come under this investment instrument. If you are a conservative investor, how exactly can you look at NPS debt schemes? And are these schemes better than what's already available under investment instruments that we know about? Let's break all of this down. We have Kurian Jose, CEO, Tata Pension Management, plus and Arnav Pandya, founder, Money Edu School. Good evening and welcome to the show. All right, so let's get the basics clear over here, Arnav, first, because we are talking about NPS, an investment instrument where we have a different type of schemes depending on the kind of risk profile or the kind of risk appetite an investor might have. But when we talk about specific debt-oriented schemes or fixed income schemes under NPS, could you please highlight those type of schemes?
Good evening. So when you look at NPS, it is a retirement planning instrument which is available for investors across the country. And the key part of NPS is that you as an investor have to make a choice on two main fronts. One is in terms of which is the fund manager that you are choosing to manage your funds. And second and most important is how are you going to allocate the money which you have or the money which you're investing into various asset classes. So NPS gives you a choice in terms of equity. There's an alternate asset class, and there are two debt components to this part. One is corporate bonds, and the other is government securities. So when we look at the entire portfolio of the NPS, we have two options within them, which is the corporate bonds and the government securities option, which actually classify as debt for investors, and the debt exposure which the investor decides in terms of their allocation has to be allocated between these two areas. So that is primarily how the investor is going to get a debt exposure in the NPS. And this is what they need to choose from in terms of how much of their investment they are going to allocate to corporate bonds and government securities.
All right. Also, Kuran, if I need to understand the kind of return these debt schemes have given in past few years, how do you think, how do you see them faring as compared to the other fixed income instruments which are available outside NPS?
For having Tata Pension over for your show. To the right question of yours, what kind of returns it has generated? I think the GSEC category has generated about 8.5 to 9.3% in the last 10 years. The corporate bond category has generated anywhere between 7.5 to 8.2% kind of a return. So I think both the GSEC as well as the corporate bond has generated pretty good returns, much better than a lot of other instruments that are available in the fixed income category.
Mm-hmm. All right, but then over here we are talking about NPS, okay, which is actually a retirement investment instrument, Arnav. And when we talk about a retirement goal, if it is timely decided, if it's planned well, it's going to be a very long-term goal, and that's the reason why NPS turns out to be one of the best investment options as far as retirement is concerned, because you've got a longer lock-in till almost 60. So when we have such a long tenure of investment in our hand, Arnav, do you think one should be looking at debt-oriented schemes in NPS, or the better way to utilize this kind of an investment product is to have a certain amount or maybe a higher amount of equity exposure?
So there are two aspects to this. One is the time period when an investor is actually joining or at the stage at which he is currently as compared to the retirement. So for example, if you have still say 20, 25, 30 years to go for your retirement, then having a higher equity exposure is a logical aspect, and which is why also the NPS allows for young investors to have an exposure up to 75% of the portfolio in equities. The second part is that as a retirement planning tool, even though there is a very long period which is available for you till your retirement, it is essential that there is a balance between the risk that you are taking and the goals which are there and the kind of investment that you are making. So typically every retirement portfolio should have a slightly stable element within it, and hence a debt exposure to the retirement portfolio even when you are young, and which can progressively increase as you grow older, is a necessity and it is required, and which is why you will need to have an exposure to both the corporate bonds part as well as the government securities part within your NPS exposure. And for that matter, even when you are looking at your overall retirement planning exercise, it is most likely that, see, the NPS is not likely to be the only option where which you are using for your retirement planning goal. There could be multiple areas that you are investing in, and there also it is necessary that you have exposure to debt, which can increase over a period of time as you inch closer to retirement.
All right. Kurian, I really want to understand now when we talk about debt schemes under NPS, we have two ways of investing in NPS. One is through an auto choice and one is through an active choice. How an investor, as per these respective choices, can opt for debt in their portfolio or NPS investment?
Fair enough. So I think the right question is, I think the first thing that needs to be answered is that why NPS? I think it is a great retirement tool. It has a lot of features which are really useful. And like you rightly said, you have an active choice and an auto choice. Now, I think active choice is meant for the more informed subscriber who knows what his risk-taking ability is and what kind of time frame that he's looking at, and he can allocate between equity and fixed income and alternate assets. If assuming that he's on the conservative side and he wants to allocate between debt only, then he has an option of going 100% into G category or 100% into the corporate bond category, and toggle it between either of these two assets. The advantage that he has in the active choice is he can move money between corporate bonds and the GSEC category 4 times a year, and depending upon how rates are moving or how the entire credit scenario is developing up. So, long story short, the active choice allows you to kind of move at an individual level, at subscriber level, between corporate bond and GSEC. But there is a significant segment of our population who may not be fully informed. For them, I think the auto choice makes sense. And the auto choice adjusts between equity and fixed income depending upon your age and how your age progresses. So you have three categories of auto choice, which is the progressive, the moderate, and the conservative. Where the equity portion starts from 75%, 50%, and 30% respectively, and it dials down the equity as your age goes up, and it increases the fixed income portion as you go up. So, in case you want only fixed income in your portfolio, you need to go the active choice. Whereas if you need a mix of equity and debt, you could look at auto or active choice.
All right, Arnav, if we are talking about debt or fixed income instrument options which comes under NPS, but then it's also very important to give a differentiation or maybe a clarification as to the, the investment instruments available already, apart from NPS also, which could be a better choice if you want to club this particular investment for your retirement goal. We have the debt schemes available under NPS, but then what about the debt mutual funds and other fixed income instruments which are available?
So obviously, for an investor, there are various other options which they can use for the purpose of meeting their retirement goals. So, for example, if you are already an employee, you will have the employees' provident fund in which there is a contribution going, and this is virtually a debt option in the sense that a very small portion of the corpus goes towards equity, and that to the incremental portion depending on how much is allocated by the EPFO, and the return is virtually announced each year. So in that sense, the return is not floating around too much because it's virtually decided every year, and they try to keep it stable. Similarly, you have debt mutual funds, and within the debt mutual fund categories, you have various options, which includes target maturity funds, which includes various long-term debt funds. So these options are available to you. The question now is that you can use either these debt options, or you can use the debt portion within the NPS for your debt exposure for your retirement portfolio. The question for each individual is this, that how much are they going to invest into areas which give them a sort of a comfort level, because things like EPF, PPF, all these are have an element of comfortability for a lot of investors as compared to a debt mutual fund and even the NPS, where the returns are variable. Now you got to look at this in two ways. One is that you might get a better return in these kind of debt mutual funds and all, but you have to have the right inclination and the right mindset for it also, because these are long term products. The rates or the returns will vary. Various debt market factors are at play here, and you need to have patience and understand the entire debt cycle, which goes in terms of a higher interest rate, then it comes down, all those things. So these kind of understanding is also required. And the point is that if you are allocating some money to the NPS, then using the debt option there is not a bad idea at all, because anyways you will have to use some debt within the NPA exposure. But the good part is that if you do not want to lock yourself in the money till you are 60, then you can use the debt mutual funds as an alternative, which you have allocated towards your retirement, but you have a little bit of flexibility in using that money for some other purpose also.
All right. So I also want to understand the tax implication, Kurian, because now since you are investing in debt schemes as per NPS, what could be the tax liability? In what way?
So in NPS, so let me just give you a slight answer to your previous question as well. So like Arnav rightly said, there are mutual funds, there are FDs, there are bonds that are available. You also have the in the NPS you have the tier two. In the tier two also you are allowed to invest 100% into G6 and 100% into corporate bonds. And here there is no lock-in at all. So it is equivalent to a mutual fund. It is equivalent to a low-cost mutual fund because the expense ratios here are kept significantly low. So for anybody who does not want to lock in the money for till 60, Tier 2 is an option. Coming back to the current question of taxation, so the NPS is an EEE product. There are very few products that are available as EEE. So at the time of investment, up to 9.5 lakhs can be saved as tax. That is a summation of 1.5 lakhs under ATCCD, 50,000 under ATCCD 1B, and about 10% of your basic, which is capped at about 7.5 lakhs. So total about 9.5 lakhs is what can be saved from a tax, and it is agnostic of whether you are in equity or debt. So that is the first E. The second E is during the time that you spend as an investor, as a subscriber, the entire money is tax exempt. So even if you switch money between asset classes or pension fund managers, the entire journey is tax exempt, which is not the case if you switch money from banks to mutual funds or to other instruments. And the third E, which is at the time of withdrawal. So at when once one a subscriber attains the age of 60, you can take 60%, up to 60% of the money can be withdrawn tax free again, and the remaining 40% again is tax free and is invested into to buy an annuity. The proceeds of the annuity, which is a pension income, will be taxed at the marginal tax rate of the investor at that particular age group or at that particular time that he's whatever is his like tax bracket at that particular point of time. So this is the only product which gives you an EEE end-to-end EEE product. Only the annuity will be taxed at the marginal tax of the subscriber at that particular age.
All right. Now, let's assume a few scenarios where, Arnav, if someone is invested in NPS via an active choice and has a mix of schemes where they have exposure to equity as well as in debt, what if someone, as per the active choice, starts investing via debt schemes, but then feels that they need exposure of equity also to earn returns and to maybe have the goal accomplished. Can they switch their allocation or their schemes? And if they can, what is the entire process? How many times in a year you can change your schemes and just stay in one pension fund manager?
So obviously, I mean, the answer to this is yes, you can change your allocation if you want to. The the other part to this entire issue is this, that see, once you make an allocation towards equity and within various instruments in debt, the logical thing is that you should allow for some time period for this to actually work itself out. Because just because it's an active choice, you have the ability to switch even more than once during the year, doesn't mean that you have to actually switch it. Your switching of exposure from one area to the other should be under two circumstances. One is when either there has been a big change in the weightages due to either say the equity has run up too much or it has fallen a bit too much, or there has been a sudden spike in the debt returns due to say a downward interest rate cycle. If this is the condition, then there is one a reason for you to change the allocation. Two is that if your needs have also changed and your requirements require that going forward you need a different kind of asset allocation, then you can also change. But my suggestion would be that even if you are an active investor, do not quickly or multiple times keep changing just because there is the option which is available to you. Let one asset allocation which you have done work itself out, and if there is a need, you can always change both the fund manager as well as your allocation within the various asset classes.
So, Kurian, ideally, if you could just explain us by example, ideally, how should an NPS portfolio look like? You know, maybe we can just go age-wise. You know, for a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, and a 50-year-old. If someone is invested via active scheme, how can you change your allocation, and what can be the right amount of exposure? Because the goal is just retirement. Okay, and if you're investing at the age of 30, you still have 30 years to go, so on and so forth. So what could be like one model NPS portfolio according to you in terms of exposure?
So, Kavita, I would just like to say you can't have a one size fit all for everybody. Everybody has different risk appetites, and everybody has different goals, and everybody has different asset allocation. I think what is most important is asset allocation as per somebody's risk taking ability. Now, if somebody is 25, I'll just give you a small question, a small example. Suppose, and that's the question that keeps coming to me is, am I too young to start investing for my retirement? Empirically, what we find is when if somebody invests just a simple small number, about say 5,000 rupees at the age of 25, and his corpus at the age by the time he's 60 is about 4.5 crores. Similarly, when he come instead of starting at 25, the same 5,000, if he starts at the age of 30, the corpus is almost half. So the entire idea of retirement and the entire idea of lock-in is that you get money locked in, and it's like a fill it, shut it, forget it. That you put money, it's for your retirement, and you get it. You take the money out when you require the money. So that is the entire idea of NPS. Having said that, like I said, there is no thumb rule as such. I mean, obviously, one thumb rule is that 100 minus your age is your equity allocation. So suppose you are 30, suppose you are 25, you should have 75% into equity. Similarly, if you are 40, 60% into equity. But again, that's just a thumb rule for a person who may not be fully acquainted with the market. So it finally depends on how what is your asset. I mean, what is your risk taking ability? I think time has shown that among the all the asset classes, if you have given the asset class enough time in the market, equity capital markets, so equity has given the best returns whether compared to any other asset class, whether it be real estate, debt, bank FDs, or any of them. So personally, we would always advise that investors should be as much, 75% at least in equity, and dial it down as they go up. So since it's a retirement corpus, I think equity is a very important aspect. If equity, and like I said, equity is not for everybody. It comes with associated volatility. So then you could look at dialing down your equity and having more fixed income. So I'm sorry, I will not be able to give you a one size fits all for every age group. It all depends on individual risk taking ability.
Sure. Quickly, Arnav, what would be your answer on this model portfolio?
So model portfolio, I mean, you've got to look at it this way because you are looking for each individual who's going to decide what is right for themselves. The younger you are, if you are looking at a 30-year-old, the logical thing should be that you should have a higher exposure to equity, and as compared to your debt exposure. Maybe you can also have some exposure to the alternate asset class, because that's something different which you are getting within this entire portfolio. How much depends on each individual, how you are going to take, because the idea for a higher equity exposure is that you are making use of the time available to you. Similarly, I mean, when you get to 40, maybe you will be having to dial down that equity exposure slightly, and by the time you get to 50, you should be thinking in terms of ensuring that the risk that you are able to take within the age group of 50 to 60, which could be diminishing, because now as you get closer to retirement, you want surety on the kind of corpus that you have, or which you will accumulate. So keeping these factors in mind, it should be the trend of reducing equity exposure. How much depends on you, and how much you're allocating depends again as for each individual separate.
All right, I think it's time to wrap up the discussion. Thank you so much, both of you, for being on the show and helping our viewers with this aspect of NPS today.
Thank you.
On that note, let's take a quick break, but then post that, let's talk about in new investment trends, from AMC's perspective. What are fund houses doing when it comes to new investing trends? What kind of innovative products are they launching? And what is also grabbing the attention of an investor when it comes to interesting investment themes? All of this and more after this break with Tarun Virani.